We have with us Professor Sudarshana Seneviratne, who's in the studios, and he was the former High Commissioner of Sri Lanka in India and currently nominated to be the High Commissioner of Sri Lanka to Bangladesh. And he's also the former Director General of Central Cultural Fund and Emeritus Professor to the University of Peradeniya, and currently Consultant Professor of the Faculty of Technology at the University of Sri Jayawardenepura. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Sharifa. How do you do?
I'm good and glad to have you here with us this morning.
Likewise, yeah.
And first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about your experience. I don't think it's a little bit, but let's touch on your experience in the field of archaeology.
Good morning, Farakam, Assalamu alaikum, and Aibowan. I'm very happy to be here today because always it's a pleasure to interact with the public. I always appreciate public intellectuals and also the public knowledge about the interaction we have with them. And see, when you speak about archaeology, it is a big thing. It's a very, very broad area. And also, in an interesting context, tomorrow is the Archeology Day. So it's a nice coincidence. And also, when you speak of archaeology, my expertise, actually I came into archaeology through history. So I believe that unless you have a good knowledge and master your sources and your knowledge about the historical past, it's very difficult to interpret material culture. Archaeology per se is about material culture. It deals about human biology. It's a very strong, very structured, multidisciplinary subject now. So if you are talking about archaeology, you have to speak about history in a big way. So when you contextualize both in time and space, archaeological data in a historical context, it's very important that you have your parameters worked out for your interpretative studies, because that is the most important thing. As a professional historian archaeologist, I think it's very important that we get this framework kind of worked out. The history of archaeology in Sri Lanka itself is a long one. It goes about to at least over a century, and so is in India. It is heavily influenced by antiquarianism and also the colonial history and how we looked at history according to their version, not our version. So we had this whole, what I would call, very interesting situation, how you collect your data and then interpret from our point of view, different from what the colonial history is and the colonial paradigm. So there is essentially a paradigm shift we needed. So from the 1950s and 60s, we were slowly moving towards that. And in the 1970s and early 80s, the universities started teaching archaeology in a more on a scientific basis. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest flips we had was the introduction of the Central Cultural Fund. It was kind of a real kind of blast, where you have all our World Heritage Sites identified, and then you're doing research, explorations, data management, and also a whole explosion of museums and all those things. And also gathering a whole group of young professionals under that. So from that point of time, from 1980s onwards, we are now moving towards new areas of study. These are pluses and minuses. We'll talk about it as time goes. But this is exactly where archaeology today stands.
And that's overall archaeology. So how do you see the future of archaeology in Sri Lanka?
Sharifa, it's a double-edged question, I must say. Mm-hmm. Because A is that we as senior professionals, we like to be in the background now and let the younger people take over. When we look at archaeology for the future is how we look at human history and the environmental history within that framework. When you look at that, we also have to understand new issues. We know since 1970s and 80s, we had an ethnic war. So the whole issue of identities comes up. We also have environmental issues that have come up with what you call opening of the economy and the globalization of the economy. We have those issues coming up. So we have environmental issues coming up. So archaeology is not a standalone subject. It is a very strong, multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary subject. Having said that, you have to also see archaeology as a ripple and counter-ripple effect in archaeology. But people actually recognize the priorities that have been given to archaeological studies. So I look at our hope is for the younger generation so that they come with an open mind. I mean, one of the first things I say in my lectures in archaeology or history is that you have to come into this classroom with an open mind. You leave out all the biases and prejudices and also your fears and your illusions outside the door and then come in. Start working with an open mind. Unless you do that, you'll never recognize the validity of your own data. Unless you have that thing worked out, you'll be looking at a disjointed and falsified history. So this whole thing is about how we look at the past and we look at the future. So we have this whole line we have, past in the present and present in the past. So this is a kind of a dialectical situation, how we apply in understanding history and archaeology, so that the youngsters, the young people, get this message to do good research. Critical thinking is very important. This is what we tell our students. Critical thinking is important. You don't just take it. And often I quote the Kalama Sutra, what the Buddha said. Don't accept things, even what your teacher says. So go back and question all these things. Unless you question things, unless you ask a question, you don't get an answer.
True.
Okay. So you have this whole dialogue in history. And also you have to understand what we are trying to tell our students, even when you go to the future, there is no single history in any country amongst people. These are multiple histories we are talking about. So if you're having multiple history, you can't go on a single history. Okay? And you have to also understand there's time and space. So these are things we have to understand if you are stepping into the future, how we are going to understand those things. And then the technology is very important. Because today, digital archaeology it has helped us so much. Today, as an archaeologist, we have to use the sciences, biological sciences, chemicals, chemistry, then biological sciences of understanding human remains, environmental archaeology to understand the context of things. So we are not talking about, in the past, it was about how beautiful a monument is. What's the width of this or the height of a statue is, Then also you have to go beyond that when you tell the new generation of archaeologists in the future, start questioning it. Who are the people? What happened to the common people about these things? What do we do? Till 1980s, we were not even excavating a village site. We were all hung up on these nice palaces, the gardens and the stupas or churches or what have you. But then you are talking about a small spectrum in society that did those. What happened to the multitude of people? Exactly. How did they think? How did they live? What were their passions? What did they want? Now, this is the archaeology we are digging now. Okay, so I don't know whether I answered your question, but...
You did. And do we see a lot of youngsters getting into this field now in Sri Lanka?
It is, both for positive and negative things. Yes. There are a lot of young people, they come to meet us and they like to get involved in digs. It's very romantic to go. I remember, when I did my excavations for 40 odd years, I always took my daughter. And our family went and lived with our students, and it's one of the most pleasurable experiences. You go to the field, you're living in the jungle, you're living in the people. That is the most important thing. And this, I think, the education my daughter didn't have in school, that was her university in a way. You go there, live with the children, you eat with them, you play with them, go to the river and bathe there, learn about the environment there. You never get that experience in the cities. We are so clogged up in a city, an urban situation. We don't see that there's a whole world outside there. So that is a thing that the youngsters like. Then we are talking about digital technology. A lot of young people like to dabble out with this digital technology, and we are doing that. And that has given us an amazing array of input, how we can reach out to these things, and we can redo a lot of, you can just play around with digital technology, but it has helped us a lot. But also answering certain questions about the biology of people, about, one of the areas I've worked on is about racism, understanding race and how parochial people can get.
And we're still talking about it.
Yes, and about especially how you distort history. So this is why I said there are multiple histories in our country, all over. So if you are doing that without misleading people, and one of the things I think I just took a clue from what His Excellency the President told, that how you have a Sri Lankan identity, that under a Sri Lankan identity, how you respect all these things, especially when you scratch the surface about your own identity, then a lot of things come out, and then you want to wonder, what am I and who am I? Where did I come from?
We got to question ourselves now. So we're going to shift from the topic of archaeology to your experience you've had in India, and you've been working there for 10 years as the High Commissioner.
A slight correction, I lived in India for 10 years.
Right.
Yeah, because soon after school, I went to India, and as a student, an undergraduate, and did my BA, Masters, and my PhD at Delhi University and Jawaharlal Nehru University. But I must say my love for India was something that was kicked up by my own parents, especially my mother and father. They sort of always looked at India and South Asia rather than looking at the West. And they prompted me that if you had to and they knew my love for my history and archaeology as a kid. They said if you had to understand your history, you should have the bigger background. And
you need to be curious as well to be an archaeologist.
Precisely, yeah. And you go back to India and question how a lot of these things happen. Yeah. That is one. Another thing was my own school at Ananda College. Teachers, in fact, two of my teachers are Reverend Kotagama Vachisara and Mr. Thanabala Singham. They sort of prompted me about history and India. And so once I went to India, I discovered that how small I am. It is an ocean. And once you go there and you get your expertise in history, you touch all these things, you meet different people, it's a whole universe. And it's not only India, you are looking at South Asia, you look at Pakistan, you are looking at Bangladesh. That time, soon after I went, Bangladesh was born, all these countries. And this is why I became a kind of a specialist on the SAARC region and also the Indian Ocean Rim activities. So then all these things, and also I must also mention the very loving help I had with my classmates. By the time I became High Commissioner, I think I had about 6 cabinet ministers in the Modi government and about at least 6 to 7 secretaries who were my classmates. So working there was very, very convenient, I must say. His Excellency Mahinda Rajapaksa, I think, understood this, and he said, you should go now because all your friends are in position. And that really helped. So there's a whole thing about India and how we worked on the India strategy. And because understanding India is, I won't say it's difficult, but it's very complex. It's a huge country. It has a long history. So any diplomat or anybody who goes there should essentially understand the thinking of people, how they react, how they reach out to you, what is its history, its language differences, what their aspirations, them understanding their own power. So these are things you have to take cognizance of trying to understand as a diplomat, because unless you understand in any country the history of that country, the culture of that people, their religious belief systems, all that, it's very difficult to be what I would call a good diplomat. Yeah. So, I mean, I can go on spell out certain things about what we did in India, but I'll just like to keep it to you.
And let's talk about the foreign policy. I mean, we understand that Sri Lankan foreign policy is quite capable of handling pressure from other countries, but how did you handle the Sri Lanka-India bilateral relationship?
Yeah, Sharifa, I must say, as much as I got support from my friends, India, you see, it's, okay, you're talking about India or in general
India-Sri Lanka.
India-Sri Lanka, okay.
Yes.
So what we had to do was to work both a combination of economic diplomacy and soft diplomacy. Because both countries, the SAARC region, has so much on culture and heritage, we can actually use those things as an outreach conduit. On the other hand, we need the economic aspect and the political aspect. We are next to a large neighbor. We have to understand that reality. People might think that, oh, India is there. No, we have to recognize what India is and what India is to us. So we have to strategize ourselves on those things. So having said that, we had to kind of, it's a kind of you had to also have a multi-track situation working with India. You know, economics, religion, culture, tourism, and all those things. So, and India has a very interesting, what I would call it a contradiction. You have the union government, which is strong in the center, but equally strong are the states in India. So if you are working on India, you have to reach out to those states and work with them. And this is exactly what I did. And I was very blessed because I had a lot of my friends in those states, in the media and all those things. So you reach out to those things. And we had a whole series of things, from pharma to tourism to education, then bilateral things on trade, shipping, all these things worked out, and tourism as well. And once we worked out those things, you're reaching out in a way. In rugby football, we say you work a blind side. so you had to work a blind side as well and work on those strategies.
And I'm sure we have a lot of talk on that as well, and about how we should be handling things post-pandemic as well.
And from the background of India, especially and South Asia.
Good morning to you. If you happen to just tune in, and we've been talking about archaeology and about Professor Sudarshana's experience in India, and also about the bilateral ties and about the foreign policy and handling bilateral ties with a massive country like India. But while the music was on, we've been talking about archaeology again. So I think we should also touch on the work done in terms of archaeology here in Sri Lanka. Professor, why don't you tell us a bit about what you've done?
Yeah, thank you. My engagement with archaeology was starting in early 1980s when I joined the Department of Archaeology at the University of Peradeniya. And from the background of India, especially and South Asia, looking at what I would call the broader picture, we saw the need to contextualize archaeology on a broader canvas. And first thing was training young people for critical thinking, application of scientific subjects, and also what I would call open-minded interpretations that are required. So this we started from the 1980s, and the Central Cultural Fund, founded by Dr. Roland Silva, and there's a whole galaxy of archaeologists that time who helped him. We all got together, Professor Prematilaka from Peradeniya, Professor Senaka Bandaranayaka from Kalaniya, then Dr. Siran Dernigala, who was from the Department of Archaeology, and there were a whole string of people who actually were involved in this enterprise. And we were training, and also we started working on the sites. parallel to that, we started developing the curriculum. So we had very definitely something that was looking towards scientific archaeology, professionalizing archaeology. So that was the most important thing, to build a base of young people to carry out this mission of retrieving our history and interpreting it for multiple purposes. From the from 2000, the millennium, we were also looking at the application of these subjects through the sciences. So that was very important for us. And if I may touch on some of the work we did was, one of the areas I really focused as at first the director of the Central Cultural Fund, UNESCO Central Cultural Fund, then as the Director General. How do we take this out to a broader vista? That is, taking it to the people on the one hand, and then take it to and internationalizing this. So this is why we had, during that time, also the programming of the Sustainable Heritage Tourism Program through this. So that was very important that we start looking at these aspects. In doing so, we developed what we call an archaeological database. We started doing conservation work, training younger people, taking archaeology to schools. In fact, in Kandy, we started school clubs. Actually, we incorporated schools of all denominations, students getting involved in heritage work.
So does that happen countrywide?
We started as a pilot project in Kandy. So 22 schools were involved in that, across the board. Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, Hindu schools, children were involved in this whole enterprise. Because, Sharifa, the thing is, we were doing archaeology at a period of war. Mm-hmm. So we had to understand, on the one hand, without giving into the kind of idealist situation what terrorism was promoting. On the other hand, we had to counterbalance with a Sri Lankan identity with this. So we were using archaeology, heritage, how people understand their identities, how people respect each other for their identities, and how archaeology can be a retrieving factor for that. So we actually did so much of conservation. We developed marine archaeology that time, and we had some very big projects going on the museums. We had multi-religious museum at Kataragama. This was President Rajapaksa's dream. How do you present to the world our inclusivity? That was so important. We had the Gaul Marine Archaeology Museum, Maritime Archaeology Museum. In fact, under my watch, we conserved the whole Dutch fort in Gaul. So what you're seeing as a tourism hub today is what we did, and we are very proud of our younger people, young archaeologists, young engineers, young architects who did that. We also finished the Sigiriya Museum that time, at the state-of-the-art museum. We also developed what you call the museum at Polonnaruwa. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Polonnaruwa we have, if you want to talk against parochialism, what the LTT was doing that time, here you have 20-odd Hindu shrines nestled within the Buddhist sites. I mean, where on earth in the world you have that kind of situation? I mean, these are things that people should value. And how
people lived together back then.
Precisely,
exactly.
And the coexistence is so important. And this is something, if we actually look at our own heritage, we can see that, Sharifa, Sri Lanka is in the middle of the Indian Ocean rim. So you have the convergence of various cultures, religions, technologies, identities, all coming and converging here. But there were no swords drawn at each other. It's amazing that how we coexist at that time. And this itself shows how strong we are, the resilience we had even that time. Then you come to the post-colonial period and we are killing each other for wrong identities. The myth about certain identities, this is something we debunked a lot what the LTT books did actually on their identity. But then on the other hand, you have all types of parochialism coming. So as an archaeologist, you have to start thinking as a scientist. And this is why I always keep quoting from the Kalama Sutra, where the Buddha says, question everything. Don't accept anything uncritically. Now, having said that, we also develop things like, if you go to Kajugama, we had a replica place, reproduction center. We developed a printing press. We redeveloped it whole thing. So we have our own publishing thing, and we try to go for both Tamil, English, Sinhala publications in these things, so that we had to be ready. This is something what President Rajapaksa is very keen, that the war will end, but we must be ready for tourism. We must be ready to get back our people in the diaspora to come back, to respect their own identities and all these things. And one of the strongest messages he gave, and what we did was, he said, when the war ends, people will need some places to go and worship. So we did a whole listing of places of worship in the north and the east, and we gave it to His Excellency. And he said these things should be redone for the people to have places to worship. And then he saw his thing about multi-religious museum in Katragama. All these places are so important for all religious groups. So the message was, after the carnage of the war, the ravages of the tsunami, how do we reach out to people? The people-to-people effect you have in this. And so heritage can play such a strong role, Sharifa. So for understanding, for rebuilding, and reaching out to people, and you and I might be sitting in the comfort of urban situation. The people, whatever communities they were, the Tamils or Sinhalese or Islamic or Burgher or whatever, everybody underwent the pain. So how you sort of reach out and soften that situation and make all people stakeholders of this country. So that is the message, I think, that is continued now under the present President, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, as well. So everybody becomes a stakeholder.
Exactly. And we'll also touch on the work you intend to do in Bangladesh and about President's vision on economic and soft diplomacy. And you did mention, Professor, that this happens to be your favorite song when I said that I love this as well.
Yes, I call it the song of the universe.
Any specific reason behind that?
Yes, I think it sends a strong message for people to understand themselves.
And humanity overall. So let's touch on the work you intend to do in Bangladesh, Professor.
Sure. One of the reasons we are looking at Bangladesh is that Bangladesh has been a great friend for Sri Lanka. They have been very good to us, and we have been a good friend to them. Now, one of the other reasons is that we have become very big stakeholders in Bangladesh. We have huge investments there. Bangladesh, for multiple reasons, it is located in the northeast sector of the SAARC region, looking at the eastern quarter of Asia. So it's not India, actually, it's a Bangladesh that is there. That is one. And number two is that Bangladesh stood with us even during the Geneva situations, and as a good friend. In my strategy of diplomacy, I'm not a hard bureaucrat. I think people-to-people connectivity is so important, and this is the work I did in the SAARC region, in the Indian Ocean Rim countries. Bangladesh is the same thing. Bangladesh has been very good to us. They have opened our doors to us. We have massive investments going on. And Bangladesh is today, unfortunately, the pandemic has hammered everybody, but that was, till the pandemic, it was what I would call the strongest economic powerhouse. Their investments are great. Their GDP is great. They have expanded into so many areas into the international market. It has become one of the major suppliers in the apparel industry. And so we have people from tourism, we have people from the apparel, we have people from various other areas in construction, IT. A lot of these people converging in Bangladesh. There are at least in Dhaka alone, if my data is not, if it's not wrong, there are nearly 3,000 to 4,000 professionals based in Dhaka alone. So, this is telling a big story, right? Now, having said that, we are looking at Bangladesh. So, what are the strategies I like to use? I like to use it as a kind of a symbiotic relationship, a connection with another country, a country that has been good to us, and we've been good to them. It has to be a two-way process. It has to be a give and take policy. It has to be a symbiosis where we depend on each other. And so there's a lot of goodwill that goes with that. And I know how much you are respected as a Sri Lankan when you're in Bangladesh. When you say you're from Sri Lanka, how much of warmth that creates towards you. And also, I have a small story about Bangladesh. When I went to India in 1970, I don't think any of you all were born, but I was an undergraduate. And in 1971, when the Bangladesh war with Pakistan started, there was a small delegation of Bangladesh friends from Sri Lanka who came, and it was led by my uncle, Sir Senrat Gunwardena. There was Professor Kumari Jawardena who was there. And once we were there, I remember meeting up with a whole group of young Bangladeshi people, or youngsters, not undergraduates, some of the undergraduates. We all got together and had this huge exhibition at the Vigya Bhavan in New Delhi. And that was an exhibition, all the atrocities that were shown during the civil war. And that was my entree to Bangladesh in the beginning. And I know it is a kind of a history of blood, but
I know.
Yeah, it is a very, very sad chapter. But the present Prime Minister's father, so Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, was there, and we sort of looked at him as a kind of an ideal statesman. Unfortunately, he was assassinated. But I'm so glad she's back in power, and she's keeping everything so tight and so well in face of terrorism, which was done by the ISIS in Bangladesh. She quelled that, and she has kept the economy together. And I think I'm so, in a way, privileged to go there. And of course, the pandemic has hit all of us. But still, I think we had to look at situations beyond the pandemic to have situations worked out.
Since you touched on the topic of pandemic, yes.
So I like to also add that what we are looking at Bangladesh has so many different areas. We are looking at tourism. We are looking things like luxury cruise, heritage tourism, ecotourism. We are looking at the development of apparel exhibitions there. It's possible if you can have fashion shows, then tea boutiques. We are looking at pharma. Then we are looking at agriculture, water management. Marine industries, and there's so many different areas we can work together. And I'm sure Bangladesh and things like shipping industry, it's very important for both countries. And so I think this is also, I like to stretch it out. You may want to ask me questions about the SAARC and also the IRA on this. Yeah, and we can go beyond that, because Bangladesh is also a partner of the SAARC and also the Indian Ocean Rim countries, what you call conglomeration. So in all this, the strongest point we have is our location. The central location in the middle of the Indian Ocean, one. Number two is that it's a place of convergence. So our heritage here in Sri Lanka could be shared by any country in these areas. It could be Buddhist, Hindu, then it could be Christian, it could be Islamic. We have all these communities here, and we can reach out to everybody. And Sri Lanka is a good haven for what you call industries, for redistribution. This was our historical role during the historical period. So we can bring things, reprocess them, and we can export these things. So these are the strong points we are having. And this is exactly what His Excellency the President is looking at, our central role in the Indian Ocean.
Speaking of that, I think with the pandemic hitting globally, tourism, which is one of our key contributors to the economy, has also hit rock bottom right now. So what should we do in terms of building our country?
Sharifa, I'd like to go back a little bit or expand on your question a little bit, because this issue about our strength in a pandemic situation and how we look at the post-pandemic situation, I think we have our priorities done right. His Excellency the President and his team has worked very well, and I think if you look at the global situation, we have touchwood, we have worked out very well, and we have survived. All of us are able to do what we are doing now today. I mean, when I get on the street, I can see people moving, kids going to school, universities are going to reopen, and life goes on almost in a normal situation. And hopefully, we don't have the misery of a second wave. Having said that, I think we should also look at the basis for this. How did this happen? I mean, I think this happened actually with the stability we had with the quelling of the terrorist war, one, overcoming the tsunami war. Now, that gave us the kind of a national resilience to withstand this kind of thing. That was a bloody carnage, but we withstood that. We withstood the tsunami. So, the what I would call the administrative, the mindset of the people were all having conditioned by these situations and how to overcome these things. I think a lot of people have not understood this very valuable experience we had. Now, we as academics and archaeologists and historians, we underwent this whole process and we put things right. In fact, I'm picking up the strands from that because we are looking at a post-pandemic situation, Shafia. And that we have to see because we were all stuck in the global situation. Now, the global situation has collapsed. Okay, globalization has now been questioned. Okay, what do we do? Where do we stand? Are we just pulling our hair out or what? No. We look at our base. In the past days, we also say small is beautiful, yes. So we are looking at the micro situation of the indigenous strength we have in our own country. Now for that, history, archaeology, heritage can play a major role. How do you go back understanding what were the former crop types? What are the hydraulic systems we had? What were the raw material we were working? How was the food preservatives done by the traditional people? Now, these are the things. I mean, everybody are running to eat, drink kotamalli and all those things. Why were we doing that? Why were we not going for the Western medicine? I mean, not I'm saying anything derogatory about Western things, but we have a lot of rich culture with us. So start tapping that and develop that so that this post-pandemic, in fact, we are working on a post-pandemic sustainable, sustainable development situation where we combine both what we can take from the global situation for our trade and other things, but firmly keep our feet on the ground. Now, to do that, Sharifa, you have to understand what HE had contributed. I mean, this is exactly what we brought up in a book called Urban Revolution. What he started in the post-war period, in 2010, he started the redevelopment of the urban situation. What you enjoy in Colombo, what a lot of people enjoy now, is the development of the urban ethos. Because once you give that, I remember when I was in India, after we developed the urban situation and the cities, they used to say, hey, after the post-war period, Sri Lanka is India's business class. Okay, so that means they were actually wanted to come here, enjoyed everything what we opened up. With the peace we had, with the development of the economy, with the development of the cities, our eating places, and it just opened up. Now that is the benchmark we had and what HE actually did. So we brought out this book, it's about 300-page book. Last October we released the e-copy of that. And we are hoping to release the hard copy very soon. So 4 of us got together and we crafted this book. The first phase we have shown how HE actually drew the strands from the past. Heritage, the development of the urban situation of Anuradhapura and all those things, the green city, all these things, how we brought it into the urban development, knocking off all the walls and all those, ugly situations, and you have an openness, water bodies, all these things you brought up. Now, after that, he had the development of the post situation. So now we have from that, we have his vision and philosophy for the next level.
Since we've come towards the close of the program as well, I think it's time we touch on President's vision on economic and soft diplomacy, and you wanted to touch on how we intend to deal with the Indian Ocean Rim countries and SAARC as well.
Yeah, I think she's very, very bent on this economic development because he thinks that we could be the center of power. And I think that's correct because given the strategic location, we should make use of that situation. And then we are not talking about big industries. I know he has focused a lot on IT. We can make this a IT hub. We are also looking at the redistribution facility. We are looking at the advantage we have in shipping. We have the advantage of a learned community here, especially the young generation. So these are the focus areas he's looking at, and also the climate of investment he's looking at. Now, looking at that, then what is the bigger arena? We have the Indian Ocean Rim. Sharif, all these countries are colonies at one point of time. So they have what you call a great affection for us. In fact, in 2014, we brought in what you call the Heritage IORA Heritage Center for Sri Lanka. Now, that is an outreach program. Again, you touch people, you touch their heritage. This is a very sensitive thing. It's a very nice thing. You share their thing, you bring people here, do training here. We have the SAARC Heritage Center here. So we should capitalize on those things. And these are the auxiliary areas where we can support HE for his vision plan. Now, having said that, we are looking at what kind of the money market. We are looking at the movement of capital coming into Sri Lanka, how we do that. Now, how you structure that is, we have to understand in the foreign ministry is the long arm of the state. The foreign ministry is expected to take this vision plan to the global situation and then disseminate all that to our friends and people who are not so friendly with us, but also to bring them around and to say that, hey, we are doing a good job here. And we are doing a better job than you guys in your own countries. And we have managed it far better. And this is, in a way, though I know it's a miserable situation, but the pandemic has given us an opening to express ourselves and to announce to the world that we can manage situations. Our own military was vilified. That are the same military that was actually helping people, you see, to overcome. I mean, they literally put the doctors and the health sector and the military, the armed forces put their lives on the line. And these things, you can't go to an international court and then say, hey, these are bad people. Then you have to prove that. And then you see the situations that are happening in those countries where racism has really taken its toll. And especially what we've seen in the United States and some other countries in the Western world, how they treat people, and how we are treating our own people. So if you are redefining democracy, in a way, you have to start understanding how we redefine democracy in our own terms, or not on their terms, in a lot of things. So, I mean, this actually, I'm looking at the positive side of post-pandemic. I don't think we should just fall down and just say that, okay, I mean, we are not doing anything. No, we are doing a lot of things. And we can do a lot of things. And we have got the resilience, we have the experience, we have the will, and we have the leadership to do that.
And finally, the message you want to give to our listeners.
Yeah, I like to sort of share something with I call it the mission statement for the next generation of archaeologists. And this is something after all my lectures I normally tell. What we call archaeology is problem-oriented and issue-related. It is essentially a multidisciplinary study investigating, documenting, interpreting, and presenting human expressions, experiences, and behavior patterns of the past to its rightful inheritance, the next generation. Archaeologists investigating the past is a scientist who is objective, unbiased, and unprejudiced. above all, he or she is a humanist, a social activist who does not fear the past or compromises the future.
With that lovely message,
Thank you.
it's time for us to wind up this discussion. Thank you so much, Professor, for being a part of the show, and have yourself an amazing Tuesday.